Hello, everyone. This is Ed Amoroso. I want to welcome you to a discussion today that I suspect you're going to find interesting. If you are an employee somewhere, or you're an executive, or you're married to an executive, or I think that pretty much covers everyone. But what we're going to talk about today is online digital personas and how we can go about protecting them, how we can do a better job of ensuring that both employees of companies and their families and assistants and so on don't expose new risk to businesses. And we'll talk a little bit about the SEC and some possible implication, but also how you can just go about reducing your personal attack surface, your digital persona. And I have a couple of experts here. I consider them both friends and colleagues and experts. Chris Pierson, you probably all know, runs BlackCloak, knows as much about this as anybody anywhere, and he'll give us some nice tips. We think we got about 5 good tips here. I have a feeling you're going to get 20 tips today, but there'll be at least 5 good ones that'll pop up. And then someone I know everyone in our industry knows, Malcolm Harkins, who's been at this for a long time and always has just amazing ideas about these types of topics. And we're going to let them freestyle a little bit. What I'll do is I'll ask each of the guys to just say a couple of words about the topic, and then we're going to dig in. We'll sort of start with sort of business impact and move from there. But Chris, why don't you say hello and then turn over to Malcolm, and then we can get started with the discussion.
Yeah, so this is great. It's always great to be with you, Ed, and great to be with you, Malcolm, as well. This is going to be really cool because what we're really going to talk about today is covering those 5 top risks that you should be worried about if you're a CSO, if you're a CISO, as it relates to your executives, your board members, your C-suite. But we're going to go through them in terms of some of the different risks that are out there and bat it back and forth. I mean, we've got Malcolm that's got so many years of experience as a CISO, and Ed, your years of experience there and in the business world. And we're just going to blend all those together. It's great to be here. I think everyone knows me in terms of BlackCloak and digital executive protection, but Malcolm, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Chris. And again, great to be with both of you guys. And the decades we've all known each other is fantastic. And we've all had those issues where the folks in the C-suite or ancillary to the C-suite in positions of trust, generate unique risk attributes that we all have to manage. That are outside of the work and blend into the work environment. I started seeing that again 20 plus years ago at Intel, and it's certainly grown tremendously in terms of the potential importance of it and the vectors of risk that can hit an organization.
Malcolm, let's keep it with you, because darn it, I thought in the context of business impact, I'd thought of everything you could think of on that SEC ruling, and you point out something that I think we'll start with, and that's business impact of your digital persona. Like you as an individual, whether you're a CEO or an employee of the company, your activity online, your persona, the manner in which you protect yourself could have impact on the business. And Malcolm, you'd suggested it could be material, and we all went, whoa, that could be a problem. So share a little bit of your thoughts on that one, and maybe whether that materiality could create some risk we hadn't been thinking about.
Yeah, well, I'll give you 2 examples. Chris has heard these from me before, but they might be new for some folks, and some of them are actually several years old. So this was already creating potential risk back a few years ago. But I had experience with one incident where a home system was popped, drive-by, organized crime, somebody clicks on something, system gets owned. Well, organized crime hackers noticed that Jane Doe is married to John Doe. John Doe is an executive in a company. Well, they then go to a nation state actor who would have interest in John Doe in that organization. They provide that owned system to them. Well, now that owned system is leveraged in an attack. It's found out afterwards when they find a material event, and you start traipsing back through the weeks of forensics, and you find patient 0. Patient 0 is executive John Doe. And you go, okay, well, let's find the file. The file happens to be a picture of that executive's son playing soccer. Bits had been added with malicious code. Where did you get this? Who is this? That's my son playing soccer. Well, where did it come from? It came from my wife. She emailed it to me months ago after a game when somebody had taken some photos and sent it. Well, because the home system had been owned, all the activities there were seen. Well, I intercept a real email with a real picture, bump it, delay it a little bit, and guess what? The perfect fish. Material impact, trace back to a home. I'll give you another example, and this one was from Cylance. We had, when I was at Cylance, a company that was looking at Cylance's technology to enhance their endpoint protection. Well-seasoned, deeply technical security engineer, security architect in this public company. And they call us up and say, I'm shutting off the POC. This stuff doesn't work, false positives, blah, blah, blah. And we're like, well, wait, you're playing with it in a lab. You've only had it for a day. What's going on? Well, I took it and I put it on my work system myself to start playing with it and see how it would affect my user experience. And you flagged on something that's ridiculous. Okay, well, what did we flag on? You flagged on my wedding photo. Can you send us the file? Yeah, well, guess what? That had been added bits to a security person who knows security because of the transfer of data that came from the photographer, somebody. And again, if I own your security engineer, I own your security controls. Two potentials that have happened that creates an external set of your persona, your digital experience, your devices, your life on the internet that affects the two companies.
Hey, Chris, I think you need to hire Malcolm to do sales and business development for your company. Like those two business cases are, but I'm guessing that these are things you must hear, Chris, in your work.
It's things that we see each and every day. I mean, when you think about it, companies in terms of like who is a key employee, who's getting kidnapped and ransom protection, who gets a driver, who gets the MX platinum card, who gets to fly in the private jet, who has key man insurance on them. They call these things key for a reason. The board, the executives, the C-suite, the ELT team, and other key personnel, right? Don't forget the associate director or the associate general counsel who's in charge of intellectual property. You want to know what patents are going to be filed or what somebody's working on, go compromise that individual. But when you take a step back and you say, SEC, what is it trying to get a hold of? It is trying to say, you corporations, if you have something that is a material risk, a cybersecurity incident is going to be a material risk, and how you're actually running your program, because you're going to have to report on that at least annually, what you're doing overall from a guidance perspective, governance perspective around cybersecurity. These people are important. They're important to the company, they're important to the board, and they're important to investors and shareholders. And as a result, something goes bad in their personal life, and I really want to key in on this. It doesn't just have to be them. If you take the son or daughter offline, which we have had happen in publicly traded companies in terms of dedicated criminal attacks, son tried to commit suicide as a result of some of the stuff that was going on. Things like Malcolm suggests in terms of targeting them in the personal life with malware, targeting the husband, wife, spouse, kids, significant other, that personal life. If you target them, it may be a financial risk. Definitely is going to be an intellectual property risk. The executives got everything on their personal devices. They're working all the time. But it could be a reputational risk, and a reputational risk can be something that causes a material cyber risk to the company. These two things are inextricably intertwined. And the SEC, I mean, Ed and Malcolm, I take a look back and I say, you got to update your program at least annually. Every one of us knows that. Annually, you got to go and report back to the board of directors, whether you're GLBA, HIPAA, or just regular good old CISO governance. We know a year ago was Uber, was Twilio, was LastPass event. All of those were employees targeted in their personal lives. And with the different scenarios that Malcolm has, and he's got a lot more over the years, a lot more. He's got a few CISO years on me even, so he's got more stories than me. But I mean, when you take a look at those items, you have to walk away and say, I need to have this covered. I need to think about this. I need to at least quantify this and decide, what do I want to do with it? Do I want to go ahead and mitigate it? Do I want to go ahead and own it? Do I want to go ahead and transfer? Do I want to go ahead and let the board know about it? Let executive management know about it? What do I want to do? It's the conversation starts now.
Yeah. So let's summarize the first of our 5 recommendations. And that's that if you are a decision maker in a company, recognize that the principals in your company, especially if you're a public firm, could have material impact based on their behavior, their online digital persona. So make sure you've got some protections and controls in place. So that'll be our first. Chris, let's stay with you and let's stay with this government theme. There's been quite a bit of activity around privacy recently, particularly in California. So I would think a second area that the folks listening ought to be focused on would be around, say, that privacy attack surface that people have. Talk to me about how you guys approach that. And then Malcolm, I'd love to hear your perspective.
It's huge. It's Ed, when you think about it, it's this kind of like digital exhaust, if you will. Everyone leaves a trail. And a lot of that trail, we all know that there's a trail in the deep web and dark web from hacked and breached databases and companies and all the rest. We all know that. That information can't go away. You can just be knowledgeable about it. More important is this data broker phenomena. So companies that just grab and aggregate all your information and sell it or give it away and share it. And what's interesting is there is now a new government nexus with it. California we're on September 14th and just passed the SB 362, the Delete Act, the first act in the United States that says, hey, you citizens of our great state of California, it's going to take effect on January 26th, is when we all have this, but you have the right to go ahead and in a one-click fashion, submit your information in through a portal that California stands up and say, I don't want these 500, what's currently registered, 500 data brokers to track me. And each person in your family can go ahead and do that. And as a result, you can shrink that attack surface. Now, we all know California, 5th largest GNP in the world. What California does, the rest of the United States looks at, and the rest of the world does. Both with CCPA, we saw that, as well as with the first data breach law ever, SB 13. Ed, wow, pulling back, SB 1386. Yeah, right, Malcolm? July 1st, 2003, California starts, and then 3 states, 5 states, 25 states, 50 states, right? And it just keeps on going. Well, California is always ahead of the pack. And what this is actually meaning for all of us is if that information exists, if it is out there, if it shows your name, your family members' names, addresses, personal cell phone numbers, personal home numbers, personal email addresses in an easy to buy, easy to find fashion, that creates an attack surface for you, the CSO, you, the CISO, and you got to get control of this. You got to get control of it. Now, California taking an important step forward, but we got to think about this as we think about, and really today's topic, right, that 5 ways to limit executive exposure. This is a great way to do it for that tranche of folks.
Malcolm, what's been your observation in this area, particularly in the context of the California law?
Yeah, well, I think it's one great that California passed it. It's necessary, and I think it'll help in many ways. And and Chris, you were in an article just a couple of days ago around the data exhaust of automobiles and what people don't know about what the automobiles are collecting from you and selling and all that stuff. So in many ways, your car is a part of that data broker capability, because once you plug your phone in, all of that stuff is flowing, and where you're going, what you're doing, and all the other things that could infer things about you. Now, again, turn this back into an attack vector. That data is all out there, and think of all the generative AI stuff that's out there. What is Malcolm's identity now, and how do you validate Malcolm when I've got voice, I've got video, and I've got all of these other things? Those attacks that I talked about that were targeted in the home, now, instead of a nation state actor really doing that stuff, it's commoditized, and anybody can grab that generative AI capability, leverage that open source knowledge about you, and craft a very highly effective attack that looks and sounds like you, whether it be on the phone, video, or just a very well-crafted phishing email.
So the second of our 5 recommendations here has to do with privacy. And I think it's all around this personal attack surface. We all sort of admit. I love the car exhaust. That's a cool, it's a cool metaphor. I mean, it's true. I mean, I know it does exist, but it's also a good metaphor. But for those of you listening, you may have no choice but to implement a program to do this type of thing. And I think the idea of trying to recognize that personal privacy is both in the interest of the individuals, good for the company, and it's probably going to be required by law. Malcolm, let's stay with you, and then we're going to go to our expert on this one, but homes. And I'm going to mention you because I know you have at least 16 or 17 mansions to your name, so we should start with you. We remember when we all worked in a building every day, like you went to work. I'm old enough to remember when that was sort of normal. Now, who does that? Now you're everywhere. But what's been your experience in your own home, with risk? And then we're going to hear from Chris, who for a living helps people protect their homes. But in all of your many mansions, what are some of the issues you worry about, Malcolm?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. So again, like you said, going back years ago, heck, I remember when even when I got my first laptop, I'd still go in physically to the Intel building Saturday morning and Sunday morning to go do work, right?
Yeah.
Now I'm sitting in a hotel because I got a speech tomorrow and I'm in Southern California, right? So, work from anywhere, work anytime, that's really kind of happened. Now, again, going back through those transitions, we had technology in our homes, systems the kids could use. They have their smartphones, multiple devices. We had to worry about them and what they were doing. And part of that was I was sensitive to it, and I imparted on them, be aware of their digital footprints and digital exhaust. And when we'd go on vacation, don't be posting that crap. You can post pictures afterwards, right? Why? Because you're advertising I'm not at home. Right. And so I've always worried about that. I've got a daughter, I've got two boys. We all did stuff when we were younger that we're probably glad wasn't recorded and in photos.
Right.
So I always tried to impart on them what that could mean for them, as well as the implications on me and my role, because they could create an embarrassment issue for me that would then potentially affect the company, and so I've always worried about, let alone just the device security and the network itself. And now we've got smart everything. My TV has listening capability. The Nest has, am I in the house, not in the house? So your Roomba is mapping the physical layout of your house. And so again, that could be leveraged in a physical thing, particularly if there was a kidnapping and ransom, if you could, breach that and get the full layout of the home and what was where. So there's a lot of things that data could be leveraged.
It's a great point. Chris, when people become, say, clients of BlackCloak, what are some things that you guys do? Like, what are the, what are the steps that you take?
So, I mean, think about it this way: is we believe, and I've believed this for some time, especially with kind of the prior classified roles I had. The home is the new battleground. It's always been the new battleground, right? Go and attack the home where you get the $5 of cybersecurity, as opposed to the company where you get the 50 million. It's almost back to the castle analogy. The king and queen, when they're inside the castle, they get the 50-foot tall high walls. It's great, but the king and queen do go to the summer cottage. They do go to the garden. They might every once in a while go down to the local brew house. Attack them there where the defenses are lower, non-existent. What do we see and what do we do? I mean, based off the fundamental principle, it's let's go ahead and hack their home on a regular basis. And that's what BlackCloak does. Continual basis, we will go ahead and target and do a pen test of every single one of our clients' homes, so we know whether it's safe or not safe. Can we get in? Or can somebody else get in? And then how do you go about and solve it? Fact of the matter is that these folks have wonderful, great equipment, great quality equipment, Crestron, Savant, Control4, Lutron systems in their homes. They got the great camera systems. Some of our clients have the camera systems that are in the full housings, 360 with the little windshield wipers on them and the heated glass elements. I mean, literally defense industry types of cameras on their compounds and their homes. That's wonderful. It's great stuff, but how was it implemented? How was it architected? How was it secured? Was it done securely? Was it done correct? I'll give you an example, and this is literally might even be less than 7 days old. Fortune 10 company. I'm not going to embarrass the individual, but it's a notable CXO type.
Narrowed it down. You've narrowed it down to 10, but go ahead.
Yeah. Well, anyhow, a lot of cool stuff, a lot of cool tech. They really enjoy it. And they had a sneaking suspicion in when they brought on BlackCloak that maybe not everything is locked down on the inside of the homes. This was a worry for the CISO, a worry for their internal protection team, both physical and cyber. The physical team was worried about it because all the cameras were attached to the home as well. And lo and behold, the team was able to get into their entire home. They were able to get into the camera systems, the DVR, the actual home systems, and every single device on the home network, which could have included, right? Could have included, we never go that far, but could have included whatever laptops were there, including potentially a work device, which is the same power that somebody else with a nefarious purpose would have had. But once again, they wanted to protect the individual, so they bought the best of the best. They implemented it, had a third party implement it, not set up correctly, some different problems there. The only way to actually go ahead and say, hey, is everything working how we want it to be working, is to go ahead and actually get that audit, get that right truthful statement that says, yes, you're good, no, you're not good, and have that review, and then have it every few days. I mean, you get the new, Weber internet connected grill, you get the new stovetop, and it's internet connected. Everything is internet connected. Who's doing what? How are they securing it? These all become really, really big issues. So you got to know what that home network looks like. You got to protect that home network, but you also got to test the home network. It's not good enough just to stand guard. You got to go ahead and mock attack it.
So let me summarize recommendation 3, and you just gave us a good lead into our 4th topic. But recommendation 3 is that people need to recognize that the home is now an extension of the business, and that your executives' homes really do need to be considered part of the attack surface. It's as simple as that. My observation is that it's probably safest to assume that you'll have some pretty weak links in there. Like, you're not going to go check out, say, if you just focus on your executives, it's unlikely that they would all, be following stellar best practice in protecting their homes.
It is, Ed. And you know this. You were one of those folks. What do you have time for? Your life was dedicated to the company, to your team, to the people around you, and you had a massive remit and a massive mission. When you went home, what's the next thing you wanted to do?
Chris, I neglect my family in favor of perfect cybersecurity. That's the way I do it. Chris, I'm the worst one of all. So I totally agree. Oh. You'd hit on something that leads us into the 4th topic, and that you started mentioning devices. And I would imagine when you guys at BlackCloak go work with a client, when you walk into a home, it used to be there'd be a PC in the rec room. Now there's devices all over the place. How do you guys deal with that? And Malcolm, I'll be interested to hear what you think afterwards. But I would imagine it's like a device soup, right?
It is. I mean, it is literally device soup. It's every type of device, every type of operating system. We don't really see any XP anymore, thank goodness. I'm sure there's something hiding somewhere. But the bottom line is it's all different operating systems, all different devices. Some people like to hang on to them for a long period of time. We just had a client with 14. The one adult herself has 14 devices. Really likes to hold on to them. I think a different device for every single room.
Saving. A lot of people save them because they think they're saving their pictures or something instead of putting in the cloud. Is it something like that?
It is that, but also one of those things of convenience. It still works. I still have it. So I'm just going to leave it in this room, going to leave it in that room. I'll take it with me to this house. So most of our clients have, 3 to 5 homes. So the device proliferation is far and wide. The types of device is far and wide. And here's another interesting standpoint is that, think about it. Malcolm, when he was there at Silence, he could say, hey, everybody's got the same, I don't know what he used, but the same model of Dell, the same model of Mac, whatever. He can force it on the company and then have stringent controls around it. It's the wild, wild west out there. Every single one of our clients has a different device and different devices within their own home and family. And so what it really becomes is this. If you have one device inside that home that is not protected, cell phone, tablet, computer, that is not protected, you're at risk of having a dirty network. You're at risk of having potentially, when that work laptop comes back to the environment, having things on that network that you don't want or you shouldn't want being associated. It goes back into point number one, could be a material cyber risk, came from somebody else's computer on the same network as yours, and that's how you get popped. But we have to think, right? We have to think in 4 dimensions here. It is not so simple to say, protect the bubble around this one person who is the executive or the person that we want to protect, and not the others that are associated with them and constantly surrounding themselves with them. I mean, and that's going to be the family.
Malcolm, anything to add in terms of devices and the complexity one finds in a typical house?
Yeah, I'd say the urban sprawl we've seen in the typical IT environment is at the home, right? I've got refrigerators. Kohler has internet facing showers and steam rooms. My microwave, my oven, my TVs, my Fitbits, my treadmills. That sprawl, my solar system, my power wall. I mean, my car, right? So that same thing that we've seen in terms of urban sprawl of devices and applications in the work environment, bring that into the home. You go back even 15 years ago, in my house, we had one main PC, to your thing that my wife and I used as a home PC. The kids would have one that they would use that we knew was more polluted, that we didn't do our stuff on. And the kids had a couple smartphones. My wife had a phone and I had a phone. That was it. Okay, so you go a handful of devices and a few applications, right? Well, now everybody's got dozens of apps on their phone, dozens of apps on their TVs. All of those things are connected and smart. So I've basically gone from 15-ish devices in a family of 5 with maybe a few apps on each of them to literally hundreds of IP addressable things that are computing, communicating, have in some cases cameras, including my refrigerator, right, to look inside and give us ideas as to what we need to buy when we're in the grocery store and we forgot. And then all the applications on top of it. It's a 10, 15, 20x growth in the attack surface, no different than what we've seen in the enterprise.
Malcolm, do you worry about the origin, like, for example, country of origin for some of the devices? Because they're made, all over the world. And, there's certainly some places that might be riskier than others. I would imagine that's a factor. You kind of come from that background around processors and hardware and build. I'm curious what you think about that.
I do and I don't at the same time. If everybody goes, okay, well, I bought from a US company. Well, guess what? There was a component that came from another company.
I agree with you.
There was a software element written by amazing software writers in Russia that is on certain systems and has been for decades, right? So, the BIOS, the firmware, you go into even that level below the operating system, there's coding that comes from people in other countries. Could be Mexico, could be Argentina, could be Ukraine, could be Romania, could be, so I don't worry about the country of origin per se on the device, because even if that said made in the USA and it was an electronic component, I guarantee you there's some type of architectural or software component that has come from another country.
I mean, Chris, does that ever come up with clients where they say, hey, make sure everything in here is made in the US? I mean, you can see how someone would want that. But I think as an engineer, Malcolm, as well, spending 5 minutes on that leads you to believe that may not be exactly going to protect you much.
We do hear that every so often. More so people they want a US company, so they want like a US throat to choke, so to speak. But when you do mention to them, hey, this camera system, right, is made in a foreign country and it's not allowed in government buildings anywhere in the US, or hey, this IP table that you have here and all the rest, that this is actually equipment and gear that is not really used by mainstream corporates. I mean, so there's a little bit of that, but it's more so, folks that are especially in the executive realm, they're driving cars that have been manufactured, foreign cars, foreign countries, right, and stuff like that. I think it's really, they just want a nexus as to a US throat to choke, some nexus there saying, hey, I know where to find these guys, as opposed to they're not domiciled here at all.
So the fourth of our 5 recommendations here in protecting the digital persona of executives, employees, prominent individuals, and so on, is that you need to recognize that the device profile, the whole plethora of devices, not just for the individual, but family assistants, in particular, their secretaries and so on, who have the whole diary, the whole contacts for their boss, that these devices are a big part of the attack surface and need to have quite a bit of attention. And now we saved the most complicated one, I think, for last, and that has to do with accounts and identities and sort of the profile that exists as we use social media and apps. Malcolm, you'd mentioned all the different apps people are using. Chris, I'm going to start with you. I would imagine that's the most complicated thing of all. I mean, a family could have 1,000 accounts on things, right? That must be just a tangled mess to help them figure out, with passwords, two-factor, with accounts, with identity. I'll real quickly, I come from a service provider background, and people would say, oh, what's a big deal? You have an account. And we would always say, yeah, you think so. There's a billing account, there's email accounts, there's digital online accounts, there's serial numbers on every device, there's serial number on the set-top box. I could go on and on and on. These are all identities that are attached to accounts, that are attached to pass. It's like this combinatorial explosion of stuff. I think that's where most people get hit. That'd be my guess. But how do you, in the world, do you guys manage that kind of complexity for even a modest sized client?
Yeah, so the I mean, the real secret is you got to go with the highest profile risks. Which one of those are going to be? It's going to be your personal email. It's going to be your personal financial accounts, your healthcare accounts, and your social media accounts. Yeah. That's really, you get those, you cover off that 90%. That's really
like some sort of a Pareto effect where I see that makes sense.
It is exactly that. That's where the good stuff is. We're not saying that, Nike.com account is not important or is unimportant, because if you ordered stuff, you have your name, you have some information about you in there, and you have where it got shipped to, and you got some cell phone numbers in there. But what we're saying is, let's not boil the ocean, because we have to meet our clients where they are. We can't tell them. Once again, difference of the inside of the company, where you can tell people, you can kind of allow list, right? What apps they'll use and what services they'll use. In the personal life, no such thing, right? What you just want to do is help them better secure, have better privacy around what they are doing, what they're using, that brings them joy. And so with that said, right, we always start there at kind of the email level, making sure that the account has not been logged into by someone in a foreign country or a country that they haven't traveled to, making sure that dual factor authentication is there, making sure that there are no forwarding rules that are associated with those accounts. Really hardening those email accounts is where we have to start. And it's one of those things where most people say, hey, there's nothing important there. I'm not really embarrassed of anything there. And then when you go through, hey, every single time, let's just say Gmail, every single time the tax return stuff gets emailed to you, it's putting it somewhere in Google Drive. Every single time you're trusting estate information, right? It's there. All of these documents, this treasure trove of material, which is a huge reputational risk, not to mention it has tons of PII in it, personal information in it, but it's all there from the account. So we have to really start there with meet the person where they are, figure out the assessment of the things that are important to them, and go through that. It's talking to them about email is one thing. The financial accounts, they understand. It's an easier conversation. Healthcare sometimes is easier, believe it or not. It's a little bit harder on what actual service offerings healthcare companies have for login. Sometimes they're not right at that highest level. The one that's interesting is social media. Just like at LinkedIn, everything on LinkedIn is public. Well, no, it isn't, because sometimes you go back and forth in private messages on LinkedIn, but also who you're next to, who you're connected to, that is valuable information. If you're a wealth manager, well, guess what? You're probably connected with your clients, and knowing that if somebody targets your LinkedIn account, downloads all that file, they have a really good roadmap to who are the wealthiest people that they should target. So you got to think about that whole entire bubble of accounts, account protection, in addition to all the other items that we talked about. But with executives, it can get really, really complicated fast.
One of these days, I hope I'm going to need wealth management. I wish those guys would call me. They never do. But real quickly, are you using automation, like some tools to do this? It seems like like in my mind, I go quickly to manual, but I'm guessing you guys probably automate some of that discovery, don't you?
It's there's absolutely a mixture, but what I will say is this, is that where you have the most success is tailoring solutions for each individual. So
Yeah.
even within a home, let's just say it's 4 people in the home, we're going to have 4 different settings of privacy settings that people want and security settings. Some people are going to want the social media protected and secured. Some people aren't. Same thing with email, all the rest. But it's all very, very individualistic and changes within the same home. So there is a massive manual component to it in order to make sure that you have delight and no friction. Probably more important, no friction.
Yeah, that makes sense. Malcolm, what's been your experience just with all the different combinations of accounts and systems that we all use in apps? Is that all resonant?
Yeah, it does. And as Chris mentioned, it's and you've talked about it, you know, all that explosion that I talked about,
Yeah.
you know, of all those apps and all that stuff. And then you've got all these identities. It becomes a real problem. You know, a couple other things to kind of add on to Chris's list, though, to kind of bring back to our beginning thing on materiality. You know, again, you think of post-COVID, we do telehealth, we do counseling appointments online. My medical login information, that identity and stuff is critically important. Imagine, you know, when I'm doing my counseling visit, I'm on a Zoom and the bad person knows and is recording all my nightmares and issues and worries and problems and marital problems and all that other stuff, right? So, you know, that's again an attack surface item. You know, we've got executives who date, they're on dating apps. Well, you know, again, those things can create some interesting, you know, dynamics and problems. I mean, think it wasn't what, 8 years ago, Ashley Madison, and think of the data dump that got out of that. Right. So you have all these interesting vectors of things that again present a level of risk. Now, the other thing that I'll add on top of it is I am deathly afraid of managing that myself and my teams and my IT teams doing it. We had to do some of that at Intel because there was no good outsourcer to do it. But in the physical world, you generally go outsource that with trusted individuals because you don't want an employee, you know, basically monitoring your executives because that creates other problems of things that they can't unsee that then could cause also an employment issue. Does that, you know, employee now have, you know, information on somebody that they can leverage? So you want to create a level of appropriate separation so that you can also manage that, you know, company boundary versus the personal boundary. Because when you don't, that also generates another critical risk issue for you and HR and legal and e-discovery and all that other crap that you don't want to have your employees in the middle of.
You know, in a minute, I'm going to ask each of you to give a final, like, one pithy recommendation for people. But I want to take a moment to thank both of you. Malcolm, always a delight to hear from you. Always learn something. And Chris, thanks for being a sponsor here. With BlackCloak, I think you guys are tackling a problem. I think everybody's underestimated. I know I do. I have a feeling, I think I've shared this with you before, that when people think in the future about the types of things they would like to get as benefits, say from a company, whether you're a board member, executive, or even just an employee, I think you guys are hitting on something that's going to be important to all of us. So thank you for what you do. Keep up the good work. It's important. Malcolm, we'll start with you. One last parting piece of recommendation to people listening about, you know, their team, their executives, their board. What do you suggest? And then we'll give Chris the last word. But go ahead, Malcolm.
I would say the head of security should go have a conversation with the CFO and general counsel on the material risk implications of protecting their executives' digital lives. Yeah. The one thing you should do, at a minimum, do that.
I'm going to quote you on that. I think I'm going to say that 100 times in the next few weeks because nobody's saying that. That is really true. I've been on webinars and panels and everything on that topic. And that is a really valid point. Chris, you're going to make a fortune out that one, I have a feeling, but just teasing you. But
we'll be able to have those 12 other mansions that Malcolm has.
yeah, no, you don't think you'll ever reach that level of wealth, but no, but Chris, why don't you take the last word? Give everyone some advice here, and then before we close.
I think this. I mean, as a CISO, as a CSO, I mean, in my prior two-time life as a CISO, the fact of the matter is that my duty and obligation is to protect the company, the people that are there, and really, everything that we're doing, whether it's a service company or a product-based company. That means that I have to think about what are those risks that are outside the castle wall, the external cybersecurity items, the personal cybersecurity items that can come in and affect the company's documents, intellectual property, finances, reputations, all the rest. The biggest folks that we have at the company, the loudest voices, the most notable people are going to be those board members, executives, and C-suite people, and their lives are inextricably intertwined with the company. Their personal lives and those of the family are inextricably intertwined with the company. And you take that in terms of an attack surface, you take some of the SEC guidance on material cyber risk, and then you just take a look at the attacks that have been happening over the past year. Cyber criminals in nation states are targeting people in their individual lives because the controls have gotten so high, so far in depth, that they're harder to get through, and they're targeting those individuals. It just is one of those things where, at the very, very least, think about it, roll it into your annual risk assessment. Definitely talk to the general counsel, the CFO, CEO. Definitely talk about it with your board and the risk committee of the board. Find out what you should be doing. Think about the things you should be doing, and then make some conclusions from there to figure out how you're going to go ahead and mitigate it. But at least have the conversation. That's where it all starts. Have that conversation.
Wonderful advice. So on behalf of my team at TAG and everybody listening, thank you both for sharing some really good points. I hope folks will be in touch with Chris. Easy to find him on the BlackCloak website. Malcolm and I are hardly wallflowers on the internet. You can find us pretty easily on LinkedIn or whatever. So if any of you have questions, you can always find us, and we're happy to respond. So again, guys, I always enjoy catching up. It was a fun discussion, and I hope people enjoyed it. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Ed.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks, Malcolm.